I'd like to share right now is going back to the 1950s with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was seeing a couple and their young daughter at a private audience. And of course, the couple had specific issues that they wanted to discuss with the Rebbe and sought guidance from him. And after they finished speaking with him and asking him whatever they had been waiting for, the Rebbe turned to the young girl who was 6 years old and he said, "Do you have any questions?" So the couple were a bit unsure, what's their daughter going to say? And they didn't really want her to take the Rebbe's time, but the Rebbe was very encouraging and insisted that she ask if she so desired. And with a look of concern on her face, she said to the Rebbe, "What does the Rebbe think of atomic energy? Is it good or is it bad?" So the Rebbe looked at her and he said, "In your kitchen at home, you have sharp knives, right? Is a sharp knife good or is it bad?" So the girl answered, "Well, it depends what you use it for. If you're using it to cut food and prepare a delicious meal, then it's good. But if you're going to use it to hurt somebody, then it's bad." So the Rebbe smiled and he said, "Yes, that's a very good answer. And that is exactly the answer that applies to your question as well. Atomic energy or any other new technology that's developed, it can either be good or bad. It depends what it's directed for. It depends what it's used for." So when we speak about the concept of klipat noga, that neutral area of objects or activities that are not specifically holy inherently, and they're not negative either. Really, we are the ones in control over here. We are the ones who are going to be able to decide, do we infuse it with meaning, with purpose? Do we use it for a godly goal? Or do we utilize it just for self-indulgence or enjoyment, or worse, to do something that is incorrect or sinful? So, and this is really the Hasidic view of Tikkun Olam, where when we are faced with the opportunity to use something neutral, whether it's food, whether it's going on a jog for exercise, whatever it is, if we use it for a godly purpose, to energize us to fulfill a mitzvah, or to connect us with another person and give them some help, in whichever way we can elevate it, that is an opportunity to bring repair to a situation or to a particular object or experience. If we don't do that, then of course we are losing that opportunity. And if it's something that is evil or negative, then we are having a negative impact. So I'd like to share a story which will, I think, give us insight and a different way of looking at negative challenges that we can encounter. Because as we all know, as human beings, we face temptation, we face conflict, we have desires. That's part of our makeup. That's part of who we are. I think to meet somebody who doesn't have any of this inside of them, I wouldn't think of them as a real human being. So this story takes place, I believe, in the late 1980s, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to tell part of the story, and then I'm going to let the rabbi with whom it took place tell the rest of the story by sharing the video. The rabbi's name is Rabbi Slavatitsky, and he lives in Belgium, and he is a wonderful rabbi there. And at that time, there was a young man, we'll call him Daniel. I don't know if that was his real name, but that's what we'll call him. And he was very attracted to the Judaism that this rabbi was teaching and sharing, and he came to spend more and more time with the rabbi and in the synagogue, and he was really drawn in and he would study. And as time went by, he decided he wanted to take on more observance. So he started to put on tefillin and he started to keep Shabbat. And slowly, he was really moving further and further in his observance of Judaism. One thing, every once in a while, he would tell the rabbi that he can't come for Shabbos. He's got somewhere, he's got to be away. And the rabbi describes how whenever he would say this, he would kind of look down and he wouldn't be able to look the rabbi in the eye. The rabbi didn't prod or probe. If he didn't want to share, that was his, he has his right to privacy. But one day, the young man came over to the rabbi and he said, I haven't ever discussed this with you, and I know that I'm very committed. My Judaism is important to me. I really believe in all these things that I'm observing. But I just have to tell you that many years ago, quite a number of years ago, obviously before he began his path to observance, he had met a girl, a non-Jewish girl in Italy, and he had planned to marry her. And he said, I can give up eating non-kosher food. I can give up going out on Shabbat. I can't give up. That's it. I have to marry her. There's no way I can't. Okay. So the Rabbi Slavatitsky tells him that in a few weeks he's going to New York. It's a special occasion. He's going to see the Rebbe. Daniel, why don't you come with me? Let's go speak to the Rebbe. You're obviously conflicted about this. Let's see what the Rebbe has to say. So Daniel said, I've written, of course, my parents are not very happy about this. And they've taken me to this rabbi and to that rabbi. And I was told all the terrible things that are going to happen to my soul if I sin like this. I really don't think another rabbi is going to be able to help me and do anything for me in this situation. So Rabbi Slavatitsky says, why not just come, just try, what can it hurt? Okay, so Daniel agrees and they set a flight to go from Belgium to New York to see the Rebbe. And Rabbi Slavatitsky describes, he's preparing Daniel. He says, okay, we're going to go see the Rebbe. This is, the Rebbe is going to be giving out dollars. The Rebbe had the line where people would, after he no longer had enough time to see people privately for a meeting, people would come by and he would give them $1 for them to give to charity, and give them a blessing at the same time. And this way he was able to see many more people. So Rabbi Slavatitsky told Daniel, everyone's going to be going by, but when you come to the Rebbe, you stop and say as short as you can, just to tell the Rebbe what your issue is, what you're struggling with. Okay, so they get in the line and they're waiting in line. And I will now share, I hope the video will work. I'm going to share the video where the rabbi describes the encounter, the actual encounter between Daniel and the Rebbe. Okay, so it's in Yiddish. This rabbi is speaking in Yiddish. He's at a Hasidic bringing together with a Yiddish-speaking audience. But as you can see, we do have the subtitles over here, so you should be able to follow along.
hörst du? Ich bin dir Mekane. Eberster will, als der Mensch wird gehen, gibt ihm ein Leid. Leiter, Sulam. Was ist der Leiter? Nisoi. Wenn der Eberster gibt dir ein Nisoi, zum Chassene mit der Schicksal, gibt dir ein Leiter. Und glaubt, he trusts, in English. He trusts you, as you can, אתה יכול, du kannst, איך אומרים לעמוד? Beistelden. Robert gesagt, ich bin dir bekannt, weil ich hab nicht gehabt, dem ich soll. Erste Welt. Ja. Ich bin bekannt, weil ich nicht habe. Du hast alleine zu gehen. Und der ist der Drast, als du kennst euch.
So obviously a very unexpected response. I mean, for a man like the Rebbe, who was all holiness and godliness and spirituality, to say something like this, I envy you. And the way that the Rebbe embraced the struggle, understood the conflict, and recognized this is part of being a human being. And I think that often we can think to ourselves that because we've struggled with something that we feel perhaps really should be beneath us, or perhaps we've even stumbled and made a wrong choice on one occasion or another, we might think that we have no access, we don't deserve access to spirituality, or we don't have the ability to access spirituality. But the Tanya teaches us that being imperfect, being flawed, having different temptations and desires, this is part of who we are. And not only is it part of who we are, it gives us an indication of what God expects of us and the direction that He anticipates that we will and can go in. As the Rabbi answered, you're facing a challenge that I never faced. I was never able to sacrifice to God in the kind of way that God is giving you the opportunity to do. So even if we're talking about struggling with negativity, there's potential for purpose, for holiness, for elevation and meaning inside of that as well. And if we go back to the diagram, I'd like to just share it again. We have the diagram over here with the spiritual makeup of the soul, where we have the internal part, the who we are, which includes the wonderful talents, abilities, drives, aspirations on the godly side, and on the natural side also includes positive traits, but can include negative or self-centered traits as well. That's everything that's going on inside of us. But what counts is these three garments. The Alter Rebbe teaches us that we can access spirituality through doing our best to make sure that our thought, our speech, and our action are involved in good, positive things and infused as much as we are able to with purpose, meaning, and with God's bigger plan and bigger picture in mind. There's a story of a non-Hasidic scholar who went to visit a Hasidic yeshiva. He came to the yeshiva, and it was the first time he'd encountered this style of yeshiva. And he was very attracted to it. It very much appealed to him, and he decided he wants to stay and he wants to become part of this. What was so impressive for him? He said that what impressed him the most about the yeshiva was the lunch. The lunch, I mean, he's a great scholar. This sounds quite petty. And especially this particular yeshiva we're talking about during Russia and the time of Soviet Russia. Times were hard. Being Jewish was difficult. Studying was difficult. Physically, there wasn't much to eat. I mean, there was nothing to be impressed with the lunch over there. So he explained, what did he say? He said, for the first time in my life, I'm seeing people sitting and eating, and it looks like an intelligent activity. It looks purposeful. It looks like it's part of something bigger. It's not like people who are sitting together and studying deep philosophy and getting involved in all sorts of intellectual ideas, and then, okay, let's go take a break. It's time to party and enjoy ourselves. They did the studying, they did the spiritual work, the character development, and then came time to take a break from the studying. And the lunch wasn't a break from that moral development and that purpose and that focus and that goal. It was an absolute extension of it, as was everything else that the students did throughout the entire day. So at the right in the beginning, I gave an example of honoring parents, and I described how we can have different motivations when we show honor to our parents or when we choose not to show honor to our parents. And I described how we can feel genuine goodwill and desire to help them and even put themselves before us and our needs. But that could still be under the jurisdiction of the animal soul. How would we know that? Because it has a limit. If it comes to a point where we feel like I've been helping them so much, it's been days, weeks, months, Or it comes to a point where we feel like, I've been doing all this for them and they should really be appreciating, and I haven't heard a word of thanks. We come to a point of a limit and it doesn't feel good to us anymore. And then we say, okay, forget it. Now I need a break. Then we know that while it's good, and it's whatever we've done has been wonderful, it's still within the animal soul's control. Comes along the godly soul, and the godly soul takes us over and moves us beyond our limitations, where we continue to honor and respect and help, even if we have to move out of our comfort zone, even if it's not the most enjoyable for us all of the time. When we stop doing good deeds only because it serves our self-interests, and we start, or we continue those deeds past what feels good to us, then we know that it's godly, we know that it's holy, we know that it's uplifted and it's elevated. And that can obviously apply to, majority of the things that we do and that we encounter during the day are really in that neutral zone. And we have so many opportunities when we eat, when we exercise, when we sleep, when we go out with a friend, to find a way to make it meaningful and to channel our inner energies in a godly and holy direction and to uplift it. What's the big challenge? The big challenge is that we have these two drives, these two souls, as I described, as the Alter Rebbe describes in the Tanya. And they're not just two roommates who happen to be living in the same apartment. Each of these are very strong and opinionated, and each of these is satisfied with no less than being the one solely in control of the body. Pun unintended. And I will share the allegory that the Alter Rebbe quotes in the Tanya to describe this and to illustrate this. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. So the body is called a small city. The two souls in relation to one's body are just as two kings who wage war over a city, which each wishes to capture and dominate even against its will and to rule with the consent of the populace. That is to say, each king wishes to direct its inhabitants according to his will, so that they obey him in all that he decrees upon them. So two kings are not going to be sharing one crown. They're battling over the same city, and each of them wants to be the only one in charge. So too do the two souls, the divine soul and the vitalizing animal soul, which originates from the Klippa, wage war against each other over the body and all its organs, the body being analogous to the city and the organs to its inhabitants. The divine soul's will and desire is that she alone rule over the person and direct him, that all organs be subject to her discipline, following and obeying her dictates, and furthermore that they surrender themselves completely to her. And it continues to describe this in more detail. And then at the end, it says, and the will and desire of the animal soul is the complete opposite of this, right? Just the way that the godly divine soul wants to channel and subjugate all parts of the body, and the emotional, psychological, mental, physical, everything for God's will and for God's purpose. The animal soul would like to do that in the opposite direction, in the most benign way, just for self-indulgence, self-preservation, and self-enhancement. And then, of course, once you start over there, there's a slippery slope which can lead to even negative and sinful behaviors as well. So that's the big challenge. That's the big challenge, that the struggle is a very strong one, and it doesn't necessarily quiet down with time, because each of these forces is very strong. I do want to bring one example, though, of how even an evil or negative character trait or impulse can actually itself be harnessed for good. Because we've spoken, I mean, obviously there's holy things that are naturally inherently holy, fulfilling a mitzvah, studying Torah, for example. Then we have the neutral, which we have the power to choose whether we're going to make it holy or be dragged down by it. And even though negative and evil is something that we can't elevate, there are elements that we can utilize for goodness and for holiness. So just to end off with a final story, it was Simchas Torah, and there was a crowd in shul in the synagogue, and they were dancing with the Torah. It's a very joyous time of year, one of the most joyous times in the Jewish calendar. And one particular individual was not very enthusiastic. He was kind of walking slowly and trudging, dragging his feet as he walked around the circle. He wasn't looking particularly happy or celebrating much at this very joyous time for the Jewish people. So one of the elders of the community came over to him and discreetly started talking to him in his ear. And he said to him, "You sin during the year with a lot more enthusiasm. This is not fair. When you're celebrating your Judaism, you should be able to celebrate at least with the same enthusiasm that you sin with. Why can't you dance the way that you sin?" He was trying to encourage and elicit some joy from this joyless individual. So we have an impulse that may be negative, right? Somebody has hurt us, or somebody is acting very arrogantly, and we feel like we really want to show them down for what they've said, or because they've hurt us, we'll show them what it feels like, we'll hurt them back. We can take that powerful force, which really one of the reasons why the animal soul is called that is because it's very, as we know, an animal has a lot of physical strength. The animal soul has a lot of strength and passion that the godly soul actually doesn't have. We can take that spite and we can use it in the opposite way. We can spite the evil. We can say to the evil, "You want to make me do bad? I'm going to spite you, and I'm specifically going to do good." So we can actually use the same emotion and direct it in a positive way. That's obviously just one example amongst many. So I think, just to wrap up everything that we've said today, we have the ability to elevate and make meaningful and godly and spiritual, even the most mundane things in our day-to-day life. And whereas we know how to be good people, we can take that goodness and we can actually move it beyond plain goodness into the realm of holiness and spirituality by pushing ourselves past our comfort zone when we are looking to do good for others or to fulfill a specific mitzvah. At the same time, the urges, the temptations, the negative character traits or thoughts, or the struggles or the failures that we have, while they can make us feel like we're unworthy or incapable of approaching or achieving spirituality, we should know that that is completely not the case. Being mindful in our garments, in the way that we manifest and express ourselves is the barometer of whether or not we are able to be spiritual or not. And also on a deeper level, the greater the challenge or the greater the negative thing that we are facing, the deeper the implication of how far we are actually able to reach, because God doesn't give people a challenge that they're not able to overcome. And as we know, while we don't wish for challenges in our lives ever, challenges, when a person rises to a challenge in their life, they grow and they advance in ways that they would not have been able to without having faced that challenge. So instead of looking at something like this as, wow, I've got to be such a terrible person if I'm struggling with something like this, or is there any hope for me if I'm still dealing with this kind of impulse? We can turn it on its head and we can realize God is telling us something. God is telling us that we're able to use this as a launch pad, and it can take us to places that we may never have considered before. So thanks for joining tonight. I'm going